Hello everybody, this is Connor, BoatsDon'tSink, here with another Shadowverse Evolve deck profile. This time we're going to be looking at the Puppetry Forest deck from BP08. Puppetry Forest is an archetype that originally got its start in BP05 with a very small handful of cards at lower rarities. However, with BP08, it has gotten a legendary sort of boss monster for the deck and been fleshed out in its entirety. And now represents what I think is probably the strongest deck out of BP08. Definitely one of the top tier contenders at the very least. As always, before we look at the deck list, reminder that this is meant to just be a starting point. Please play test, make changes that you find necessary, either to accommodate your own playstyle or meta. These things can change, and this deck in particular has a lot of options and a lot of different directions that you can take some of the powerful turns. So looking at the deck here, we are playing basically all of the Puppetry followers from both BP05 and BP08, and filling out the rest of the deck with a lot of the combo good stuffs that we've seen in some of the previous more combo-focused iterations of Forest. A lot of the stuff that you'd see in the BP04 decks, and of course Anastasia from Idolmaster Cinderella Girls. The Evo deck for this deck is actually spread pretty thin. The most important Evo we have is, of course, Orchis, but everything else is kind of just up in the air. You can play however many copies of these things you want. Not all of them are even really necessary. The biggest one is Sukuna, outside of Orchis, just because she's so important on our combo turns, but the rest can really be adjusted to your own personal liking. As always, if you want to check out the deck log page for this deck, you can use the link in the description or the code in the bottom right, which is 760XL. This deck has a rather interesting curve. It's basically 1/3 each 1-drops, 2-drops, and 3-drops, with a couple 5-drops at the top end as sort of our finisher plays. 33 followers with 7 spells. 3 of those spells are to set up our big turns, and the other 4 are kind of just meant for use on our big turns, or just to reuse things. Nature's Guidance is a pretty flexible spell. But I guess that's about it before we jump into the specific cards we're playing. Looking at the first card, we have Ephemera Sword Angel. We're only playing 1 copy of this card. It's not a super important card for the deck. I have it in here as an extra 1-drop because we are playing Fina, so we need targets to find off of that. And, of course, since we're playing a combo-focused deck, having extra 1-drops that we can play to build our combo count can be useful. This could easily just be a 3rd copy of Michelle if you want to see her more often, or you could cut it for some other card, or just make it any other 1-drop. I think Ephemera is the most powerful if you're just going to play 1 copy. There are a handful of decks right now that will allow you to get the 3-card requirement for the Fanfare. Ephemera being, she's a 1-cost 2/1 rush Fanfare. If your opponent has 3 cards on field, she gets +1 attack and a sail. You're going to be able to trigger that against decks like the Puppet Mirror, occasionally against like Thief Sword. Any of these decks that are sort of putting followers down, you can play Ephemera and use her as 3 power, like Assail, Rush, just removal. Otherwise, her Fanfare effect just doesn't really matter. She's kind of just there as an enabler, or to make sure your Fina doesn't whiff. Next card we have is our first actual Puppetry card. This is Junk, a 1-cost 1/2 Fanfare. Put 2 puppet tokens into your EX area. The puppets are what the deck is going to be based around, mostly. It's a 1-cost 1/1 rush token. However, we do have a lot of effects that are either going to be buffing these or transforming them into other tokens. But we do need to get a lot of them into our EX area, so Junk is our cheapest way to just get 2 of them immediately. Junk's stat line is not great as a 1/2, but it's fine. He can chip in for damage here and there, and he's a great Nature's Guidance target. Our next one drop is Michelle, the Mind Reader. This is the character that got the Forestcraft leader from BP02, now finally getting her first actual follower card. She's a 1-cost 1/1 that evolves for 2. She evolves into a 2/2 with on evolve, search your deck for a Forestcraft follower that costs 5 or more, reveal it, add it to your hand, and shuffle. This is essentially our version of Maid Leader. It's not as good as Maid Leader. Instead of searching an Evo, we have to search a Forestcraft cost 5 or higher, of which we only play 2 different ones. We play Anastasia and Noah. However, both of these are very important. Anastasia especially is something that we want to have on turn 5 for the most powerful plays we can sort of do with her. Noah is more important later, so if you draw Michelle early and have time to evolve her, really, you'll be setting up your turn 5 plays. If you draw her later, after you've already done some big plays and are maybe just looking for more gas to finish out the game, you might be searching Noah in that scenario. Next up, we have a Sukuna, 1-cost 1/1, yet again. This evolves for 1 into a 2/2 with Storm. Combo 3 on evolve, it gets +1/+1. Combo 5, it gets +3/+3 instead. So this can be a 3/3 or 5/5 Storm follower for 2 play points on your combo turns. And of course, since we are playing a lot of tokens, especially 1-cost and 0-cost tokens, getting the combo count up can be quite easy in this deck. And on some of our more explosive turns involving Anastasia, we can use cards like Fashionista Nelcha and Elf Song to actually buff Sukuna even higher. One of the most powerful things this deck can do is on turn 5, even going first, you're able to get an 8/8 Sukuna into play and just hit your opponent for 8 immediately. It creates some very powerful swings. Makes it very hard for your opponent to stabilize and come back, since they're going to have to spend most of their turn trying to just clear your board. So not going to be much pressure on you, and it's unlikely they'll be able to clear everything, meaning you get to get some more hits in as well. 3 copies of Nature's Guidance, Forestcraft staple. 1-cost spell, select a card on your field, return it to its owner's hand, and draw a card. We have a few different things we can use this for in this deck. It's kind of just here as a generic card advantage card. The puppet generators, since we do need a lot of puppets in our EX area, we can return them to hand and replay them back down just to get even more puppets. This can be great, like if you play turn 1 junk, then turn 2 you can swing for 1 with it, and then bounce it back to your hand, play it back down, get 2 more puppets. And 4 in your EX area on turn 2 will pretty much be enough to at least last you through your whole setup phase. You can, of course, also do this with Flower Doll and Liam. Liam as well, since he has an activated ability. Once you're a little later in the game, you can play him down, get 2 puppets, look at top 3, add a card, bounce him back, play him, do it again. Which can be great for digging for some of your finishers as well. The other thing we can use Nature's Guidance for is protecting some of our finishers. On turns where you swing with a giant Sukuna, if you think your opponent's going to be able to answer it before your next turn, you can just put it back into your hand so that you can combo again later and get another big swing with it instead of having to find a new Sukuna. Or Orchis, notably having 2 different evolve abilities. If you want to use one now and then return her to your hand to use the other later, it's just another way to protect her and not have to find a second copy. While drawing you a card as well. So, a lot of use case for Nature's Guidance, very powerful card, definitely not something we would want to cut here. Moving into our 2-drops, we have Fashionista Nelcha from BP04, Cosmic Mythos. This is a 2-cost 2/3 with an activated ability. At combo 3, you can engage her to choose one of the following. Either select another follower on your field and give it +2/+2, or select an enemy follower and give it -2/-2. This gives us a lot of flexibility. Of course, combo count is going to be quite easy to reach in this deck. So we can use her to either buff our own followers for extra damage, or we can use her as removal on some of the smaller followers on our opponent's field. -2/-2 is great at removing followers that have like a lot higher attack than defense. Things like Victoria in the mirror match. You know, even after an Anastasia buff turn, a Victoria is only going to be a 5/2, which means Nelcha at combo 3 can just kill a Victoria for free, basically, if you respond with your own combo turn. She can clear out things like unevolved Agnes Tachyon early. She can clear off some Disdain followers that might have taken some chip damage. So a lot of use cases there. And of course, she can also buff our own followers to either get in for more damage with Sukuna or just make our Anastasia or Lloyd harder to remove. So great card overall. A lot of lists will cut this in favor of heavier Elf Song counts. I'll talk a little bit more about why I don't like that when we get to Elf Song. We've got 3 copies of Fina, Dynamite Daredevil. 2 cost 3/2, aggressive stat line, good for just keeping pressure in the early game if you have to play her down. Ideally, you're not having to use this, but since our game plan does not rely, but it very much wants us to have Sukuna, and Junk is always good as a puppet generator, we play Fina here. Her 2 options on Fanfare, you can choose to either look at the top 5 cards of your deck, add a 1-cost follower to your hand, and bottom the rest. Our options there, of course, are going to be Ephemera, Junk, Michelle, or Sukuna. Sukuna is the big thing we're trying to find. We really want it for our Anastasia combo turns. Alternatively, we can grab Junk just to set up more puppets if we're in need of those. Michelle is not the best target, but it does mean that Fina can effectively dig us into like Noah in the late game by grabbing Michelle. Ephemera is kind of just there, so we hit Fina a little bit more often as the 9th 1-drop. With only 9 1-drops, you're not going to hit Fina every time. You are going to miss sometimes. You just have to accept that. She's still a 3/2 either way, and if you don't see any of the 1-drops in your top 5, it just means you're 5 cards closer to finding them. The second option we have is to select an enemy 1-cost follower on the field and destroy it. We have some decent targets for that this format. In the sword matchups, in early game, Fina can pop a Servant of Usurpation, which is great because Servant can very easily represent 3 or 4 damage, even 5 damage on turn 2. It can answer a Disciple of Disdain, which is a follower that's never going to turn sideways, so it can be hard for us to answer otherwise. Or in the mirror match, it can answer Sukuna, even on a big combo turn. An 8/8 Sukuna is still 1 cost, meaning Fina can still answer it. Next up, we have Flower Doll. This is one of the Puppetry cards from BP05. It's a 2-cost 2/2 Fanfare, put a puppet token into your EX area. So while it doesn't give us 2 puppets like most of the other cards, it still gives us 1, which is better than nothing and can help us set up a bit. The important part of Flower Doll is that she evolves for 1 into a 3/3. With Last Words, select up to 1 Puppetry follower in your cemetery, including this card, and add it to your hand. Worst case scenario, we can play her on like turn 2 going 2nd, evolve her, and if our opponent has an answer, she can just put herself back in our hand, which means when we play her again, we'll get a 2nd puppet to our EX area. Or if we use her in the mid and late game, or even just as part of a more developed board, she can add any of our other puppetry cards that we've used earlier in the game back to our hand. You're usually not going to use this to grab puppet generators, although you can grab something like a Liam if it's just what you've got in your cemetery already. Usually you'll be using this to recur Orchis, since you play 3 copies of the Evolves for her. You always have a use for her in your hand. Or SVE to generate extra Victoria tokens. Sometimes you could use this for a Noah if you've already used one and think you need another one for just a 2nd push to close out the game. Usually Noah's not going to end up in your cemetery though until like it's past the point of using Flower Doll. But yeah, Orchis and SVE are the main things here, especially Orchis. Or just tempoing early game by adding herself back. Our next puppetry follower is Liam, the Master of Puppets. He's a 2-cost 2/2 Fanfare, put 2 puppet tokens into your EX area, so very good for helping us get set up. Activated ability, Engage, look at the top 3 cards of your deck. You may reveal a puppetry card, not just follower like Flower Doll. From among them, add it to your hand, bottom the rest. You can only activate this if there are at least 3 puppetry cards in your cemetery. So you can't just do this on curve. That would be a little too powerful, a little too good for our consistency. But from turn, say, 5 onwards, you probably have enough puppetry cards in your cemetery that Liam can help you sort of keep more gas in your hand to keep going the longer the game goes, instead of running out of steam. He can add any of these 8 cards. The biggest difference from Flower Doll is that this is a way to get into Heartless Battle, which is another very important card to help us set up big push turns. The last 2 costs we play is 1 copy of Elf Song. A lot of lists are going to be on 3 copies of this. I much prefer Nelcha in this slot, partially because Nelcha is a body, but Elf Song just doesn't do as much in general. So it summons a fairy token, which is of course a 1-cost 1/1, and then it gives each Forestcraft follower on our field +1/+1 at combo 3. If we have a full field, that can represent +5/+5 of stats, which is more than Nelcha can put out at any given time. However, because it's spread so much thinner, we're only getting +1/+1 Storm out of it, which does give our opponent an opportunity to answer our board. You're mainly going to be using this on like big combo turns with like Lloyds and Victorias, so you will be buffing them. Notably, you can't buff the puppets, since they are neutral. They're not going to get the +1/+1, so that can make this a little worse. Usually that's not a big issue. You're buffing like Lloyds, Victorias, Anastasia, Sukuna. But the big thing here is Elf Song is only good on these turns. You need it to have combo 3 to do anything. The fairy token is mostly irrelevant. It kind of just clogs your board with a somewhat small body. But otherwise this is just a card in your hand that's not doing anything for you. Nelcha is at least a body. You can play it on turn 2. You can start getting damage in with it. You can play it on an earlier turn and then combo on a later turn and use its effect. So it kind of forces your opponent to answer a 3 defense follower. Whereas Elf Song, while it does provide more stats, is only good specifically on those combo turns. You can't do anything with it earlier. So I like the 1 Elf Song, 2 Nelcha split. You could of course go to 3 Nelcha, or you could go to 3 Elf Song. Or you could try to just find room for more than 3 in combination of both of them, if you want even more powerful turns. But I still like having the option and keeping the option open to buff everything, because there are some 5 damage answers that you want that extra +1/+1 on your Lloyds and Anastasia, but it's few and far between. I would generally rather see the Nelcha than the Elf Song. I play 2 Automaton Soldiers. This is a card you'll see anywhere from like 0 to 2 copies of as well. It's a 3-cost 3/4 ward, which is a decent stat line on its own, I think. It can at least keep some aggression off of you for a turn or 2. Fanfare, it puts 2 puppet tokens into your EX area. That's the main reason I still want to play this card. While it is a bit slow in terms of setup, because it's not coming until turn 3, usually you want to use your 1s and 2s to get your puppets, and then your 3s and 4s to convert them into better tokens. It is still early enough that if you're on curve for everything else, you can play Automaton Soldier on 3, play Heartless Battle on 4, and you're still ready for an Anastasia turn on 5. So it can still be good at helping you set up on curve. That's why I only play 2 instead of 3. It's not quite as powerful or not quite as efficient, rather. It is more powerful, but not quite as efficient as our other puppet generators. It is one of the only wards we have outside of our Lloyd tokens, though, so keep that in mind. Next up is our main legendary boss monster of the deck, Orchis Puppet Girl. It may not seem like much of a boss monster card as a 3-drop 2/2. It's actually kind of understated, but it is notably the first card in the game to have 2 different evolve abilities into 2 different followers. And not just 2 different followers, but 2 different sides of the same follower. So for 1 play point, we can evolve into Orchis Resolute Puppet, or for 4 play points, we can evolve into an Orchis Vengeful Puppet, if we have at least 3 puppetry cards in Cemetery. So again, this isn't something you can do early, but it's 7 play points, so you're probably going to have 3 in Cemetery by the time it matters anyway. Looking at the evolves, we are playing 3 copies. This is a double-sided card. So it's Resolute Puppet on the front, Vengeful Puppet on the back. You choose which one by which ability you evolve with, and the card just flips in the sleeve. So the front side, Orchis Resolute Puppet, is a 3/3 On evolve, summon 2 puppet tokens. And then once on each of your turns, when a puppet you control leaves the field, put a Lloyd token into your EX area. So this is nice because it is a puppet converter, as I like to call them. The way I view the deck, we have generators and converters. Generators give us the 1/1s, and then converters turn our 1/1s into bigger tokens, the Lloyds and Victorias. This does not need us to have any puppets already in our EX area, since it generates 2 on its own, and then can just turn one of those into Lloyd when it leaves the field. However, you're still going to need some in your EX area before this for your other effects, so you still need to find the generators. But this is not using the puppets you've generated to get you a Lloyd, it's just getting you an additional one. Lloyd is a 0-cost 2/4 ward. Fanfare gives your leader +2 defense. Very overstated. It also counts as a puppet while it's on the field. So if you evolve into Resolute when you already have a Lloyd in your EX area, say you push up the Lloyd and your opponent like removes it on instep or something, or you crash it into something, the Lloyd dying will also get you a new Lloyd into your EX area. Big things to keep in mind here are that it only works on your own turn, and it's only once per turn, so you can't just farm a bunch of Lloyds super fast. But Lloyd is one of the 2 things we definitely want in our EX area before our big combo turns, and this is one of our 2 ways to get it. Now, on the back side, Orchis Vengeful Puppet, if we pay 4 to evolve, instead of getting a puppet converter that helps us set up for our combo turns, we instead get an entire finisher. Orchis Vengeful Puppet is a 4/4. On evolve, summons 4 puppet tokens, giving you an entire board from nothing. This is a great card to play after your opponent sort of board wipes you and stabilizes. While it's on your field, each puppet on your field has a sail, and whenever a puppet you control leaves the field, select an enemy leader or enemy follower on the field and deal it 2 damage. Having a sail on rush tokens is fantastic, because it means even if our opponent, say, spends their turn playing a just follower that destroys 2 things when it enters, or like has removal effects, or they just like Themis Decree and make a 4/4 or something, right? Anything like that, we're still going to have target to crash into. So we can send our 1/1 puppets into whatever is on our opponent's board, and every puppet that we send in that dies lets us deal 2 damage to our opponent, or we can spread that 2 damage on their board to get extra clear if we need it. This makes Orchis a very powerful finisher option, because if the opponent ever ends with like a big ward up to try to stop you from storming in, or doing like a big Sukuna turn, you can just crash puppets in for like 8 damage anyway, and if you have additional play points and additional puppets in your EX area, you can get even more than that. So very threatening card, always something your opponent has to keep in mind. It makes one of the it sort of creates this weird scenario where between Orchis and Noah, your opponent has to both keep an answer open to remove Orchis without removing the puppets, or remove the puppets without removing Noah, since he just has so much defense, he's very difficult to remove. And it can be very hard to balance those 2 things a lot of the time. Our other 3-drop follower is SVE Murderous Puppet. This is a 3-cost 2/2, again, pretty small stat line. However, it has Fanfare, select a puppet in your EX area and transform it into a Victoria token. So that is going to banish the 1/1 from your EX area, and then give you a 0-cost 4/1 instead. With Rush and a Sail, Fanfare, draw a card, and similar to Lloyd, this counts as a puppet on the field. That is all this SVE does, but that is all we need it to do. If we can spend turns 1 and 2 putting puppets into our EX area, a SVE on 3 going first can give us the Victoria, and Orchis on 4 going first can give us the Lloyd. That is sort of the slow way to do it, but it is the way that puts bodies on our board. Since Orchis will be a 3/3, SVE is at the very least a 2/2. It has an evolve ability. You can evolve it for 2. You're not going to be using it as often as you would think. It evolves into a 4/4, which is a good stat line. It can be a body that your opponent has to remove to not take a chunk of damage. On evolve, select a Victoria on your field. It doesn't take damage this turn. So this is good if you absolutely have to push up the Victoria to remove something. Say your opponent has like a 4/4 that you just really need to get rid of. You can push up the Victoria, evolve your SVE, and now your 4/1 can rush a sail to kill your opponent's guy, and you still get to keep the 4/1. Your opponent still has to put some amount of resources into answering it. It's only 1 defense, so it's not super hard, but it's better than nothing. The big thing here is that the evolved SVE is also a 4/4, so no matter which side they answer, they have another 4 attack follower they have to deal with. But we only need the 1 copy of the evolve, because it's very infrequent that we're going to be using this, especially the later the game progresses. Our last 3-drop is Heartless Battle. This is our 3rd and final Puppet converter. It's a 3-cost spell. You select 2 cards named Puppet in your EX area, transform 1 into a Lloyd and 1 into a Victoria. This is our most efficient way to get the Lloyd and Victoria tokens into our EX area, since it gives us 1 of each for only 3 play points. However, the downside compared to Orchis and SVE is that we don't get bodies on board immediately. We also don't want to be pushing these Lloyds and Victorias up as soon as we're making them. Because this deck has so many powerful combo turns and such a good focus on that, we don't want to just like, oh, Heartless Battle on 3, push up a 2/4 and a 4/1 and make our opponent answer them. We would rather play Heartless Battle, pass, maybe our opponent gets a little bit of an advantage on board, but that 2/4 and 4/1 are going to be much more powerful and enable much more powerful things a couple turns later. Moving into our 5-drops, first we have Anastasia from Idolmaster Cinderella Girls. This is a 5-cost 2/4. Fanfare, recover 2 play points, making this effectively just a 3-cost. Gives us a lot of room to work with on our big combo turns. Whenever you play a card during your turn, if it's the 3rd you've played this turn, recover 2 play points. If it's the 5th, give each follower on your field +1/+1. So, of course, all of these Lloyd and Victoria tokens that we've been setting up are 0 cost, which lets us build combo count very, very easily. On turn 5, we can play Anastasia, go back to 2 play points, push up a Lloyd, gain 2 life, push up a Victoria, draw a card, go back to 4 play points. We've now played 3 cards on turn 5 and still have 4 more play points to work with. That gives us a lot of flexibility to set up powerful pushes with the rest of our turn. And Victoria drawing cards can help us get the resources to do that. The big thing that we're aiming for here is an evolved Sukuna and at combo 5, so that it's a 5/5 and Anastasia's 5-card combo bonus will give it +1/+1 and make it a 6/6, letting us hit our opponent for a huge chunk of damage. Anastasia herself will be a 3/5, Lloyd will be a 3/5. Just gives us a very big, hard-to-remove board that we can try to snowball into the opponent. The sort of end goal for your board is going to look something like this, where in this scenario, you have something along the lines of like 22 attack and 24 defense on the board on turn 5, and you can do this going first, since you don't need an Evo point due to all the play point recovery you have. Basically, like, a lot of times if you pull this off on turn 5, you just win the game on the spot. You put your opponent into such a position that they're not going to be able to recover, and it's one of the reasons that this deck is so powerful. Since we're playing out of the EX area, unlike a deck like Machina Abyss, it's very hard to interact with what this deck is trying to do before it actually happens. Our final 5-cost follower is Noah, Vengeful Puppeteer. This is another card from BP08. He's a 5-cost 3/6. Fanfare, puts 2 puppet tokens into the EX area, and whenever a puppet is put onto your field, it gets +1 attack and storm. So that makes these guys 1-cost 2/1 storms, can let us chip in for some good damage to close out the game. However, the real fun starts on the Evolve card. If we pay 2, making Noah 7 total, same as Orchis Vengeful Puppeteer, or Vengeful Puppet, rather, we get a 4/7. With the additional text, while this card is on your field, any puppet you play costs 1 less. So now all of those 1-cost 1/1s are 0-cost 1/1s, meaning they are 0-cost 2/1 storms. However, that's still not as good as what we can do with Lloyds and Victorias that we've built up. Because these count as puppets, they get the +1 attack and storm as well, meaning Lloyds can storm in for 3, Victorias can storm in for 5. This gives us a super good way to close out the game. The reason we only play one evolved Noah is because generally, if you're playing an evolving Noah, you have so much storm damage coming out that you're going to win the game. If you have 2 Victorias in your EX area, you can just 10 your opponent out of nowhere. And it's actually possible to do that on turn 5 without evolving Noah. Since the front side still gives +1 attack and storm, and Victoria costs 0 anyway. Something along the lines of like turn 1 and 2 puppet generators, turn 3 Heartless Battle, turn 4 SVE. You can just turn 5 Noah and then push up Victoria, hit for 5, Victoria, hit for 5, Lloyd, hit for 3, and now your opponent's at like 7 or lower. And you still have a bunch of dudes on board. So your opponent still has to figure out, you know, how they're going to answer everything. And it just gives you even more ways to snowball and take control of the game. Looking at the deck as a whole, it is pretty straightforward. The pros of the deck, obviously, you have an incredible snowball potential that leads to a lot of unanswerable board states. You have a low-cost curve. Basically, everything is cost 3 or lower, so your hands are very rarely going to actually brick. You'll at least be able to play what's in your hand, even if it's not exactly what you need at the moment. And the finishers give you a lot of sort of variety. You have options between storm damage on Noah or Sukuna, or burn damage from Orchis, just depending on what your opponent's board state is and whether they've warded up, whether you think they have removal. You can sort of have a flexible option to kill through either kind of setup. The cons of the deck, however, since it is a combo deck, it needs setup to get there. You do rely on drawing your puppet generators and ways to convert them to Lloyd or Victoria in sequence. An opening hand with like Orchises and SVEs is not very good if you don't have the Junks and the Flower Dolls and the Liams to set up. And even if you do draw all of these things to set up, you still want the Vengeful Puppets or Noahs or Anastasias to get the big payoff turns. So there is a little bit of inconsistency there. Frequently, when the deck loses, it will lose just to missing these setups. But the majority of the deck is built in a way to make these setups as consistent as possible to get us to the payoffs as often as possible. So here is the list. It is, of course, lots of 3-0s. Just want to be very consistent, very baseline, very standard. And the Evo deck, again, mess around with a lot of options. I do see people play things like Goddess by the Sunlit Sea, the 1-cost spell from Idolmaster that refunds you a play point if you have a cost 5 or higher. I've seen some other combo cards. I've seen Rhinoceroach thrown in there, so plenty of flexibility to just sort of mess around with the combo payoffs or enablers that you want. I've sort of focused on more of an all-in, get the exact puppet setups every time and make that as consistent as possible, because that's what I like doing with the deck. But you know, try what works for you. As always, thank you for watching. I think this deck is incredibly powerful. It's done well at events so far. It would not surprise me to see it keep doing well, especially as the format develops and people get more used to playing these decks. I think it is something we're going to see a lot in Toronto and Pasadena, and the other events coming up, especially Grand Showdown Run. So thanks for watching. Let me know what other decks you want to see. Let me know if you've been enjoying the Puppet deck, because I definitely have. And until the next one comes out, you should have some videos on your screen to check out now. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.